Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 22nd day of January 2022. I'm David Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Up first graphic, hazardous weather graphic showing a lot of watches out across the western interior, Seward Peninsula, Noatak Valley, Kotzebue Sound, Selawik Valley, Kobuk Valley, on down across Galena into the Kuskokwim Valley and Yukon Delta. That's winter storm watch for all of those areas. That kicks into effect Sunday night and continues through Monday night for possible heavy snow, anywhere from 6 to 10 inches possibly in those areas. And could be some gusty winds with that, so that would be blowing some snow around, reducing visibilities. And then there's a high wind watch out for the Alaska Range, and that is for Sunday night and Monday, for winds gusting out of the south and southeast up to 75 miles per hour. And then there's also a high wind watch out for East Anchorage and East Turnagain Arm, and actually probably, East Anchorage and Turnagain Arm, higher elevations of East Anchorage, Chugach Mountains, through the passes. Actually, it'll be quite windy through the passes of south central Alaska. Could see gusts 75 miles an hour. And then Panhandle and the eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat on down, flood watch continues for the heavy rains that they've been receiving there, combined with snow melt due to rising freezing levels, and also snow melt from the lower elevations. And that flood watch out due to the heavy rain. These are 24-hour rainfall amounts ending at 3 p.m. Saturday afternoon today. And Sitka picked up 3.36 inches in that time frame, and Juneau 3 1/3 inches, up at Glacier Bay Fuel Dock 3.02 inches, and Hoonah 2.81 inches. So quite a widespread area of heavy rainfall there for the central and northern Panhandle, and that's supporting the flood watch out that's out currently, remains out probably for the next day or so. And from there, satellite imagery showing moisture pushing in with a front and lifting northward. Low pressure pulling up toward Kodiak Island, southwest Shelikof Strait area, as low pressure kind of backs into the northern Bering Sea there into the northwest Bering. And that keeps snow showers and chilly temperatures out over the Bering Sea. Those snow showers really scatter out down toward the Aleutians. But cold temperatures, overnight low this morning, Adak 19 degrees. So the cold air is definitely south of the Aleutians there, but that'll start moderating here over the next couple of days. And you can see quite a fetch of moisture rolling up into the southeast coast. And that bringing that heavy rainfall in, really not pushing too far to the east. And today, you can see that area of green there that extends south and right up into the Panhandle, and low pressure actually lifting toward southern Cook Inlet this afternoon, and that pulling the warm air from south to north, and rain moderate at times across areas of south central Alaska today, with the gusty winds earlier as high as 41 miles per hour at Anchorage International Airport and Fort Richardson. Palmer had wind gusts southeast east-southeast about 40 miles an hour as well. Otherwise, some rain and snow showers over the southwest interior, and areas of snow up to the north, and areas of light snow and snow showers and cloudy skies over the Bering Sea, but winds pretty light. You can see hardly any lines there over the southern Bering Sea or the Aleutians, that resulting in fairly light wind conditions there into the Alaska Peninsula. And looking at the forecast for tonight, that continues out west there, pretty slack weather with some clearing possible over the Aleutians. Temperatures start gradually moderating from what they have been, and snow showers a lot less prevalent. Otherwise, low pressure there over the Aleutian Range continues south to north flow on the east side of that system, turning southeast up to the North Gulf Coast. So rain at lower elevations, mixed precipitation, higher elevations, and into the Panhandle, starting to dry out over the southern areas. High pressure trying to build in there with areas of snow over the central interior Kuskokwim Valley up toward the lower and mid-Yukon River Valley. But north of there, it's going to be pretty isolated and light, more of a flurry snow shower situation all the way out to the Arctic coast. And looking at tomorrow, another system pulls northward and brings another round of heavy wind and rain into the Alaska Peninsula, and then that'll spread up to Kodiak Island by midday, and in the afternoon that'll spread into southern Cook Inlet and hit the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula. And some rain will actually push into Prince William Sound, lighter amounts and lighter on the wind as well, with light rain reaching Yakutat and some showers over the northern panhandle. It'll be a drier day for the southeast coast tomorrow. High pressure builds into the southern areas for light winds and maybe some clearing. On the interior, central interior, scattered isolated rain or snow showers, depending on the elevation. North of the mountains, they'll probably be in the form of snow, but whatever falls will be quite light. Maybe a little bit more extensive area of light snow with that trough there from the western Arctic coast down into the Kobuk Valley. Otherwise, maybe some clearing for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area. And for Monday, yet another system develops and pulls northward toward the Alaska Peninsula, and that'll bring more wind and rain in, and that low will actually lift northward quite rapidly in the late afternoon by early evening, and that'll put more strong winds, again, gusts 75 miles an hour through the mountain passes of south central Alaska, possibly even the western Alaska range, with another round of warm temperatures and rain, heavy at times, from Kodiak Island right up into Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound. It'll be mostly dry over the eastern interior, just a risk of some moisture into the Copper River Basin, and probably none at all north of the mountains over the east side. A chance of snow showers or flurries scattered around the western interior areas, and northeast winds on the increase again, north to northeast winds over the eastern Aleutians, but winds stay light over the central and western Aleutians, as well as much of the Bering Sea there with that very weak low west-southwest of St. Matthew Island. And for the Sunday morning lows, 5 to 15 below for the North Slope and the Arctic coast, and 0 to 5 below for the Upper Yukon Valley to Arctic Village, otherwise above 0 in the Tanana Valley. In some cases quite a ways above 0, like at Delta Junction, low 25, Eagle, low 20. Otherwise single numbers from the Kuskokwim Delta up to the Noatak Valley and St. Lawrence Island, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, upper 20s for the Aleutians, and Alaska Peninsula 25 to 30, low right around the frost point there for Kodiak and Homer, and upper 20s, lower 30s, south central Alaska. Pretty mild for the Copper River Basin, and 35 to 40 for the Panhandle. Highs 40 to 45 for the southeast coast tomorrow, as well as southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, lower to mid 40s, and upper 30s to lower 40s, south central Alaska, upper 30s Copper River Basin, and 25 to 35 for the mid and upper Tanana Valley. 40 mile country area in the teens for the North Slope and the Brooks Range, and even the Arctic coast rising above 0 tomorrow, and teens for the Yukon Delta, upper 20s the Pribilofs, and lows for Monday morning, back below 0 but not too far below for the Arctic coast, looks like 5 to 10 below, and then you get into the Brooks Range.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Slope Central Arctic coast, and a band of IFR through the central interior down into the Kuskokwim Valley, eastward to western Cook Inlet, more IFR North Gulf Coast from eastern Turnagain Arm across Prince William Sound down to about Resurrection Bay, and then eastward along the North Gulf Coast in across all the Panhandle. More IFR showing up just south of, or just coming up to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Sitkinak Island, and over the northern Bering Sea. And for the afternoon Saturday, areas of marginal VFR with areas of VFR and some IFR over the central interior or interior Alaska. Widespread IFR still for the Prince William Sound area, North Gulf Coast, down across Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, and the eastern Aleutians, and then extending up into the southeast Bering Sea, then northeastward into Togiak Bay, all the way up into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. But VFR for the Yukon coast, Yukon Delta coast, and Nunivak Island back to St. Paul, St. George. Not too bad over the central western Aleutians, mostly VFR. Marginal VFR for Adak to Atka, and a band of IFR for St. Lawrence Island and the northwest Bering Sea. IFR there, north central interior and the central Brooks Range. Marginal VFR for the eastern Arctic coast. And for the outlook on Monday morning, we've got IFR for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast down and south of the Brooks Range, and that extends over to the western interior. Pretty widespread IFR zone there from the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range all the way down into Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, southern Kodiak Island, and northward there across the western Gulf of Alaska into the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, southern Panhandle IFR, good VFR, central Aleutians, and in toward the Pribilofs there, with just some areas of marginal VFR skirting the western Aleutians, but Unalaska Island, Dunmac Island look to be marginal. And then for the morning, VFR spreads over the southern Bering Sea and all the Aleutians, the exception being Shimmy and Attu, and some marginal VFR right on the edge there. But VFR into the Alaska Peninsula and a zone of IFR from western Cook Inlet and the southern Kuskokwim Valley, northeast Bristol Bay, right up along the west coast there, inland areas, all the way up to the western Arctic coast, and a band along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range, band of IFR. And then farther to the south, some marginal VFR for the central interior, eastward, Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, and IFR again, Prince William Sound, east, all of the North Gulf Coast, into the Panhandle, better conditions down toward, say, Wrangell, Petersburg, on down toward Hyder. And then Fort Passes, Anatuvik, mostly IFR for the day on Sunday. Adigan, same forecast, IFR. Merrill, IFR. Rainy, same thing, IFR. And windy, IFR with, windy, let me back that up a little bit there. Windy will be IFR, but VFR out the northern entrance, and Isabel, marginal VFR north side, and same pattern from Antasta, marginal VFR conditions northern entrance. Tanita, IFR in the eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. Portage, IFR. Chilcoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels at the surface, all the way up to the Alaska Range, and just north of the east, well north, almost up to St. George Island there over the Bering Sea, but back down toward Adak, and still just south of the western Aleutians, 2,000 to 4,000 feet, Gulf of Alaska, southern Panhandle. Icing, look for a considerable moderate rime icing coming northward with the next system, Kodiak Island up to the Alaska Peninsula, and increasing icing threats will also shift up into south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast. And then some leftover icing up there over the western Arctic coast, western North Slope, Brooks Range area down into the Kobuk Valley. Jet stream, south to southwest 100 knots, actually south 100 knots across the Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula area, and up to the lower Yukon River Valley, turn east westerly at about 100 knots, and then northwest 100 knots just east of the Panhandle. And looking at 9,000 feet, next system pulling strong winds northward there, 65 to 75 knot winds bearing down to Kodiak Island into the Aleutian Range, and southerlies from all the way up to the Arctic coast. And at 3,000 feet, 75 knot winds with that next system translates into widespread moderate chop, Prince William Sound to Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, eastern Aleutian.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected and the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sit sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Moving on to marine forecasts, we've got pretty light winds along the coast of the Panhandle, 10 to 15 knots from the south or southwest, seas still up there around 13 feet, and then for the inside waters, inner channels all south at 15 with seas 3 feet, except Clarence Strait looking at 7-foot seas. And the winds pick up for Monday on the south coast, small craft advisories for south winds 25 to 30 knots, 14 to 16 foot seas. On the north coast, gale warnings, south to southeast winds 25 to 35 knots, seas 15 to 18 feet. And for Clarence Strait, winds southeast to 20 knots with 4-foot seas, and 15 knot southeast winds for Stevens Passage, Lincoln Isle, Glacier Bay, south winds 15 knots. North Gulf Coast, southeast winds 30 knots for the day Sunday. Same thing for the Barren Islands, seas around 15 feet. And for Kamishak Bay, gale warnings, winds east 35 knots, 11-foot seas, and small craft advisories, southern Cook Inlet, northeast winds at 30 knots with 8-foot seas. Brisk wind advisories, northern Cook Inlet, south winds at 25 knots. Prince William Sound looking at a south wind at 20 knots and seas at about 4 feet. Then for Monday, winds come up to gale force there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. South winds at 40 knots blowing across Middleton Island, seas at 16 feet. And for Prince William Sound, southeast winds 30 knots with 7-foot seas. Northern Cook Inlet, lightest winds out of the northeast at 15. Small craft advisories for southern Cook Inlet, south 30 knots, southwest 30 knots for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. Kodiak Island, gale warning, southeast winds 40 knots. That extends from down to Castle Cape as well. Alaska Peninsula, east-northeast at 30 knots. Bristol Bay, northeast 30 knots. And the outlook for Monday, Kodiak Island, southwest winds 30 knots, seas 9 to 20 feet. And from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, winds will be west at 30 knots. Small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. And small craft advisories also for Bristol Bay, west winds at 30 knots. And for Unalaska Island, gale warnings, northeast winds up to 35 knots, seas as high as 17 feet. Small craft advisories for Unback Island, north 25 to 30 knots. Adak and Atka, or let's call it Atka, north at 25, Adak north at 15. Light variable winds for Amchitka Island, west 15 from Kiska to Shemya. And for Monday, Shemya to Kiska, south winds at 20 knots, seas 6 feet. Amchitka Island, southwest wind at 15 knots with 7-foot seas. And 10 to 20 knot winds from the west for Adak and Atka, and Unamak Island, west winds 20 knots, seas at around 10 feet. Small craft advisories for Unalaska Island, west-northwest winds 25 to 30 knots with 10 to 15-foot seas. For the Pribilof, Sunday, east winds 15 knots, seas down to 4 feet. St. Matthew Island south of 15 with 3-foot seas. And for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, northeast winds at 30 knots, Yukon Delta coast, southeast at 20 knots, St. Lawrence Island, south winds 20 knots, and Norton Sound, southeast at 15. Then we got brisk wind advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, west winds at 30 knots, the Pribilofs west at 20 knots with 6-foot seas, north 15, St. Matthew Island, brisk wind advisory St. Lawrence Island, winds northwest at 20 knots. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light west winds at 10 knots for the day Sunday, southeast at 15 for the central coast, turning south at 15 on the west side from Cape Beaufort to Wales. Brisk wind advisories, south to southeast winds at 25 knots. They'll swing around to the northwest from Wales to Cape Beaufort at 20 to 25 knots for Monday. And for the western Arctic coast, northeast at 15, central coast east at 15, and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast looking at east winds 15 to 20 knots. For tonight, rain and snow, southern Alaska, areas of snow over the central interior with light snow, scattered showers or flurries for the, say, north of the Yukon River on up to the Arctic coast. Otherwise, not too bad out over the Bering Sea. Very light winds, lack of gradient out there with scattered snow showers, mostly over the Fox Islands and back towards Shumianatu. Otherwise, it stays wet. Another low pressure persists near Shelikof Strait, and that keeps a wet weather pattern southwest flow into the Panhandle, but may clear out and dry out a little bit under high pressure on Sunday there for the southern southeast coast. Northern areas will see some light rain or showers. Big storm pushes more heavy wind and rain up to the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island into southern Cook Inlet, and then that will pull northward, and another system comes up toward the Alaska Peninsula Monday afternoon with another round of heavy rain, warm temperatures, and strong winds that will shift northward into southern Alaska by late afternoon and early evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.